Welcome to a brief introduction to the Black Celts, the African Substratum Theory Volume 1, available in paperback and ebook.
Have an open mind. Maybe all the things you have been taught about the Celts has been incorrect. Maybe the Celts or Gauls did not inhabit these islands. Imagine, for a moment, that Abbe Paul Yves Pezron, 1639–1706, a Breton theologian from France, invented this fake Celtic identity. Have the Gauls, Scots, and Cymry been fooled into accepting a false identity? Add to this the 19th century Celtic revival when the fake Celtic identity was firmly adopted. This alien identity was cleverly imposed on the people and embraced by cooperative academics. Through a grand conspiracy, an alien identity was imposed onto the Gauls, Cymry, and Scots. An identity that was composed of tall, blonde Aryan Celts with blue eyes, arriving in waves from Central Europe. The new arrivals were supposed to belong to an Aryan race and were supposed to be cousins of the Anglo-Saxons. This narrative still dominates academia and forms the backbone of the current Eurocentric colonial syllabus. However, the colonial British Empire's representation of the Irish people was very contradictory. Let me bring to your attention the 19th century British publications, such as Punch and the London Illustrated News, produced cruel caricatures of the Irish people. They were depicted as apes, a tactic aimed at shaping public opinion by propagating hatred, the same tactic used by Giraldus Cambrensis 1,000 years earlier. At the same time, colonial academics successively promoted the idea of the ancient Celts as Aryans, while at the same time dehumanizing the modern Irish. The colonial attempt at eradicating the Irish language was primarily designed to be the coup de grace, the final blow to Irish identity. However, the Gaeltacht regions survived and still flourish today. Many scholars have challenged the colonial narrative. Bob Quinn's contribution is the most important because it documents how an Irishman rejected this fake Celtic identity that was imposed on them. Race is a social construct. Anthropologists and ethnologists make up the rules to fit their own cultural bias. They tend to be committed to the outdated, racist, and hierarchical model, where the mythical Aryans, now disguised under the term Indo-Europeans, must stay free of any connection with darkest Africa. Serge's Eurafrican classification is totally ignored, while the term Eurasian heavily populates the world of academia, genetics, and linguistics. For example, Western geneticists constantly use the term Eurasian DNA, but the term Eurafrican DNA does not exist. Why? Anyone who has traveled extensively in Europe will be aware of the differences in skin color. However, the differences in skin color amongst the inhabitants of the British Isles receives very little attention. Clearly a taboo subject. However, an online forum had the following topic heading: having olive skin, dark hair and eyes but being 100% Welsh. In this forum a range of comments were exchanged about the olive skin color of Catherine Zeta-Jones and other famous Welsh celebrities. In addition to this, Welsh contributors mentioned their own skin color and how they were perceived by others. The comments reveal a lot about the variance in skin color. Examples from the site include: I am Welsh but people ask if I am mixed-raced. I have olive skin and dark eyes, and people ask if I am from the Philippines. In Japan they wouldn't believe my Welsh friend was British, because he looks Asian. Grandfather was always mistaken for a Middle Eastern, as were my sis and bro. Nana looked American Indian with a flat face, high cheekbones, dark hair, dark eyes, olive skin and small in stature. Obviously, kinship is not based on color. It is based on blood and marriage bonds. White, black, brown, and olive-colored people have always mixed. A simple analysis of the reader's family tree would reveal every color imaginable. Race is a recent invention. The Celts have conveniently become Aryans, invented by Lloyd and his English colleagues in London. The examples just quoted show how various nationalities have different perspectives on ethnicity. This is an especially important point. The one-drop rule has persisted in the USA. This social and legal definition classified individuals as black if they had one black ancestor. The dominant white American society defined anyone with mixed ancestry into a subordinate group. Even one black ancestor would be enough to place that person into the black category, regardless of skin color. This one-drop rule was adopted as law in the USA during the 20th century. Research from Harvard University by Arnold K. Ho. Published in the Journal of Personality, 113.5, 753-768, revealed that the USA's one-drop rule still did not regard biracial individuals as equal members of both parent groups. Biracial individuals are still seen as belonging more to their minority parent group. The racial hierarchy in the USA assigns the highest status to whites and the lowest status to blacks. As a result of this discrimination, only 8.24% of black-white biracial self-identify as white. An example of black-white biracial who identified as white was J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI. Millie McGee, the author of Secrets Uncovered, discovered that J. Edgar Hoover's grandfather and great-grandfather lived in a segregated black area of Washington and were classified in a census as colored. The inhabitants of Iron Age Britain are somewhat of an enigma. Many tribes lived an isolated existence and were far from being homogeneous. European anthropologists have tried to create artificial racial categories. The mythical Celts were supposed to be tall and blonde with blue eyes, and yet the native population of the western parts of Britain and Ireland, the Atlantic fringe, are well known for their raven hair, and some have distinctly swarthy appearances. Was the creation of this new Celtic identity motivated by Anglo-Saxon racism? Annie Loring Peters, in her thesis, April 1986, presented to the Department of History in the faculty of the Graduate College University of Nebraska, quotes a Cambridge professor who visited Ireland in the late 1800s, and gives a racist description of the Irish. I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw along that 100 miles of horrible country. I don't believe they are our fault. But to see white chimpanzees is dreadful. If they were black, one would not feel it so much, but their skins, except where tanned by exposure, are as white as ours. Reference CP 143, Annie Loring Peters, also see L.P. Curtis, Anglo-Saxons and Celts, p. 84. The reader must contemplate the question: was the desire to convert the Irish and Welsh into tall blonde Celts motivated by the racist views that dominated the academic institutions and society during that period? What is clear to me is that European craniometry began to decline due to the data collected could not prove the Aryan theory. G. M. Morant's work simply proved that Iron Age Britons had a stronger racial connection with the African Guanches and African Copts, and there were no significant affinities with Central Europeans. In the 1940s we see a decline in the pursuit of the scientific study of race. Craniology was abandoned, not because it was racist but because the results it produced kept undermining the Aryan theory. Even the British Iron Age, thought to have been the golden age of the fictitious blonde Celts, turned out to have strong links with Africa, Etruscans, and other dark-skinned people. This was the true reason why craniology was abandoned and forgotten quickly. In Dorset, the examination of skeletal remains from the Roman cemetery at Lankhills, Winchester, have produced some interesting results. The town of Winchester was known as Venta Belgarum and formed part of the territory controlled by the Belgi tribe. The cemetery was in use during the 4th century AD. Strontium and oxygen isotope analysis was carried out on 40 individuals from the Roman cemetery, with at least 11 being identified as possibly being foreign. Paul Boot, et al., asserts that most of the foreigners were of unspecific but broadly Western European origin, but 3 may have come from the Mediterranean area, possibly even from North Africa. The Romano-Briton graves excavated in Southwark, London, unearthed 22 individuals buried between the 2nd and 4th century AD. The cemetery at Lant Street, excavated in 2020, produced 84 inhumation that have added to our knowledge of migration patterns. From the examination of the skeletons and observable traits, the archaeologists classified the remains as follows: 28% closest to the European sample, 24% classified closest to the African sample, and 16% classified closest to the Asian sample. Again, the results show a cosmopolitan population with significant numbers of African and Asian people, constituting 40% of samples. This is a small sample of the evidence presented in the Black Celts, The African Substratum Theory Volume 1. It is a book that will make you redefine British and Irish identity. The latest edition of my book aims to bring the Black Celts up to date. Recent progress in strontium isotope analysis has helped identify the original homeland of some of the ancient settlers. This edition also gives me a chance to review the valuable contribution made by other scholars in this field. I am especially excited to share my foot shape research, inspired by the pioneering work of Gloucestershire podiatrist Phyllis Jackson. I was lucky enough to get her valuable opinion on a series of foot shapes that I had carefully collected from different communities. This new branch of ethnoarchaeology has enabled the tracking of tribal movements and helps distinguish the ancient Britons, newly arrived Anglo-Saxons, and other ethnic communities. The ancient books of Ireland and Britain are full of characters with different skin colors. This book proves that ancient Britain was a cosmopolitan, multiracial society. It raises the question, what is Britishness or Irishness? The answer is rather surprising, and it is for the reader to decide. The word ethnic is used frequently in the media. The term is relatively new, it was only included in the Oxford English Dictionary in 1972. The modern usage of this term is accredited to sociologist David Reisman in 1953. The Greek word ethnos originally meant pagan or heathen. Celts black or white. The term cognitive dissonance refers to a strong emotional or mental discomfort that arises from having two conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes. Humans need consistency in their beliefs and perceptions, so this conflict causes feelings of unease or discomfort. School children across Ireland, Scotland and Wales are taught that their ancestors were tall blonde-haired Celts. These dark-haired children are supplied with books illustrated with tall, yellow-haired, pale warriors. This results in a disconnection from their own real ethnicity. The Atlantic fringe countries are believed to have been originally populated by Afro-Mediterraneans, g. Sergi. Famous examples are Tom Jones, Piers Brosnan, George Clooney, and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Tom Jones became the focus of international news when the media started to debate his ethnicity. The Daily Mail online headline on the 1st of November 2015 was, "I am having a DNA test to see if my ancestors are black," says Sir Tom after being told he is just passing as white. The article explained how his thick, curly black hair and his deep voice led people to believe he was black. Tom Jones was born Thomas Jones Woodward in Pontypridd, South Wales. His mother was Welsh, and his father had English ancestry. Many African Americans have openly asked if Tom Jones had black ancestry. Tom Jones discussed the matter in an interview with CNN's Larry King. "When I first heard it's not unusual," Larry King recounts, "I thought you were black, and many people thought that." King continues, "Are you thinking of checking if you have any black ancestry in your DNA?" Tom Jones then opened up and informed King that he was approached by a reporter who asked him if he would be opposed to taking a DNA test. Tom Jones simply replied, "No, I would not be opposed to it." The reporters then rushed to print "Tom Jones is taking DNA test to see if he is black or not." Great headlines but not accurate. During the interview, Tom Jones did say he thought he might have some black ancestry. Larry King interjected, "They thought the same about Frankie Lane." Tom Jones shared how he always sang in that style. In school, the teacher would ask why he sang the Lord's Prayer as if it was a Negro spiritual. Larry King ended this part of the interview by saying, "It was a great compliment, by the way." The comments about this interview on social media are worth noting. Some compared him to Ryan Giggs, a Welsh footballer whose grandfather came from Sierra Leone. Others said he looked like Smokey Robinson, a famous African American singer, and most simply thought he was of mixed ancestry. Comparisons with Frankie Lane is remarkably interesting. His parents were from Monreale, province of Palermo, Sicily. The similarity between the Cymry, the Italians, and other Mediterranean people is a continuous theme in this book. South Wales singer Tom Jones regarded being thought of as black as a compliment. His love for black music and the artists he has worked with is genuine. He is greatly respected in the music industry and admired by black musicians he has worked with for decades.